is today. Do you agree with most of Jimmy Carter's book, Palestine and Apartheid, Palestine and
I have read the last chapter in full. I have the book, and it's part of my Christmas reading. I agree with the last chapter, which is essentially a series of prescriptions for how to end the conflict. With that, I agree. I think it's being attacked very unfairly in the sense that, after all, in this country, we can criticize Chinese foreign policy, French foreign policy, British foreign policy, but we can't touch Israeli foreign policy. And criticism of Israel immediately provokes outrageous charges of anti-Semitism and prompts abuse to be heaped on the person who dared to say something that's critical. I don't think, from what I have read, that Carter said that Israel is practicing apartheid. I think what he said was that if there is no peace between Palestine and Israel, the end result will be an apartheid-like arrangement between Israel and Palestine. And there's a lot of evidence to support that. Take the contrast between the settlements up on the hills, fortified, well off, with swimming pools, and the Arab favelas, in which people live without even running water, in which their olive orchards were cut down, and so forth. Think of that New York Times article 2 weeks ago, which provided statistics on the extent to which, I believe, about 40% of the land seized by settlements was literally stolen from the Palestinians. If this continues, the result will be some form of true discrimination, and this is what he's warning against. And I think people who read the book with goodwill, even if they don't agree with everything in it, should understand that the motivation is how to promote peace and not to slander or malign Israel.
Has the American Jewish Library had a influence on American policy that's not good for America?
I don't think it's good for Israel. That's the most important point.
So not good for America or good for Israel?
For America, it's not very good at all, I think.
And they've had that amount of power in your judgment?
I think they have considerable amount of power. Look at how legislation is passed limiting freedom of action of the United States in the Middle East. All sorts of acts of legislation are being passed that way. The Israeli lobby is not the only one, incidentally. I think the Cuban lobby, right, the Greek lobby, the Armenian lobby are important. Before too long, we're going to have a Hindu lobby, Chinese lobby. But I think when these things get to be extreme and too far, I think they become harmful. And I'm struck by the contrast between the attitude of many Israelis on these issues and the view of the so-called officials of the lobbies, the organizers, who then take advantage of the fact that the Congress is very susceptible to financial pressures because of the costs of campaigning.
Then why do Israeli political leaders allow it to happen?
Well, because they themselves are locked essentially in a kind of a mindset in which tit for tat becomes the name of the game with the Palestinians. And the tragedy is the two peoples are locked in a scorpion-like embrace from which they both suffer. But they cannot free themselves because that will require acting in concert. And they just can't act in concert without outside help.
Thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you on the broadcast again.
It's always good to be with you, Charlie.
Zbigniew Brzezinski from Washington. Back in a moment.